Hello there, and welcome to this quiet corner of the night. Here, curiosity is not hurried, it does not demand. It simply stretches like a cat after sleep easing itself into the open air. You have arrived at a place where questions do not rush toward answers. Instead, they drift softly like dust caught in a single beam of lamplight. This is your space now, a space for wondering, for breathing, for resting. Imagine yourself lying back, perhaps in a room dimly lit by the glow of a bedside lamp. The curtains shift slightly with the movement of air outside. The hum of life continues distant traffic, a refrigerator in the kitchen, maybe even the muffled bark of a dog down the street. But here, inside time slows. The edges soften. Every sound becomes part of the background, like instruments in a faraway orchestra tuned to a lullaby. This is where our journey begins tonight. A journey not into fantasy, but into history. A history so real, so heavy, that it reshaped the destiny of a continent. The question we will hold gently in our hands is simple in words, but immense in meaning. How did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? Before we reach that question, before we even walk into the streets of medieval cities shadowed by death, let us prepare the ground. Let us create the mood, the stillness, the frame of mind that allows such a story to be heard without fear, without haste. For the Black Plague is not only about statistics or microbes, it is about silence, candles, bells tolling in the night. It is about whispers and prayers, about footsteps on cobblestones, about the fragile weight of being human in a time when the air itself seemed poisoned. Take a breath now, slowly, in and out. Feel the chair or the bed beneath you. Notice the way your shoulders rest a little heavier each time you exhale. This is not a lecture hall. This is not a place of urgency. It is a soft, dim-lit room where the story of the past comes like a dream, slow, layered, vivid. The room of memory. Imagine a room not unlike your own, but older. Stone walls instead of plaster. A wooden table. A single candle flickering its flame, bending each time the door allows in a draught. On the table lies a parchment, the ink dark, the handwriting hurried. It is a record, one of many, that whispers of sickness, of sudden death, of neighbours lost. Outside the window, the street is empty. The silence of fear presses against the door as though even sound itself has caught the plague. It was in such rooms hundreds of years ago that people first began to notice that something was wrong. At first it was one neighbour, then another. A child one day, a strong man the next. Soon it was as though the city itself had fallen under a shadow that would not lift. The candle burns lower, the parchment fills with names, and the bell of the church tolls again and again, until the air itself seems made of grief. A gentle invitation tonight. You and I will walk softly into that time. We will not rush through the horror. We will not stand on the rooftops and shout numbers. Instead, we will stroll almost as if in a dream through villages and cities, through markets and cathedrals, through places where people once laughed, loved, and lived until death arrived like an invisible fog. The story of the Black Plague is not a simple answer to a simple question. It is a mosaic of causes, beliefs, fears, and survival. It is science and superstition, microbes and myths, despair and resilience. To understand how half of Europe could vanish within a handful of years, we must move slowly step by step, like walking through a cathedral at night with only a candle in hand. Every flicker of light reveals a piece of the painting, but the whole remains hidden until we pause, breathe, and allow our eyes to adjust. So allow yourself to adjust. You are safe. This is not the 14th century. No sickness lingers in the air you breathe. Instead, you hold the privilege of looking back gently, calmly at a world that once trembled. History is a mirror, but a soft one. It does not demand fear. It offers reflection. The atmosphere of night. Outside your window now the world may be quiet. Imagine it as the same night centuries ago, a village somewhere in Europe. A night when the streets are darker than we can imagine because there are no streetlights, no neon signs, no headlights passing by. Only the moon, only the stars, only the faint glow of candles flickering in windows. The air carries scents of wood smoke, damp earth, maybe the faint sweetness of hay stored for the winter. And beneath it hidden something else, the sharp, metallic tang of fear. People whisper behind doors. They cross themselves at the sound of coughing. They press herbs to their noses, believing the air itself is corrupt. Some pray louder, hoping their words will climb to heaven before death knocks at their door. Others fall silent eyes, wide hands trembling. The night itself feels heavier. This is where we begin. Not with dates, not with definitions, but with the feeling, the weight of air, the hush of fear, the sense of a world pausing, holding its breath, a place to rest. As you listen, remember that this is not meant to burden you, but to carry you into a state of rest. There is a strange comfort in history, even in its darkest chapters, because history is past. The people who lived through the Black Plague are gone. Their suffering turned to memory, their fears turned to lessons. We walk among the echoes, not the cries themselves, and in that there is safety. The past cannot touch you. It can only remind you that humans, fragile as we are, have always walked through shadows, and sometimes somehow emerged on the other side. So tonight, as you lie here listening, you are safe. Your breath is steady. The room around you holds you gently. Let the story unfold as a dream. Let each word be like a step into a darkened corridor lit softly, calmly by the flame of curiosity, setting the stage for the question. And so the stage is set. A quiet room, a candle, a continent about to tremble, a disease carried not by soldiers or armies, but by fleas and rats, by ships and markets, by the invisible breath of daily life. The question waits for us. How did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? But we will not answer it yet. Not fully, not in haste. First, we will walk through the world that existed before it. A Europe of fields and villages, of crowded streets and solemn cathedrals. A Europe unaware of what was about to arrive. Unaware that within a few years its population would be cut in half. To understand the plague, we must first understand the life it entered. To understand the silence, we must first hear the laughter that came before. So rest with me here in the opening. Let the candle burn low. Let the question linger soft and unanswered, like a bell that has been struck but whose sound still hangs in the air. This is only the beginning. The candle is still burning. The room is still quiet. Outside, the night continues its patient watch. And now, with the calm in place, we can finally turn our eyes toward the heart of this journey. The question we have carried in silence is ready to be spoken. How did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? It is a simple sentence, only a handful of words. Yet each word is heavy, like stones placed one by one into your hand, until the weight becomes difficult to hold. How the word of curiosity, the opening of a door, did a confirmation, a truth that is already accepted. The Black Plague, a name that is both poetic and terrifying, a name that belongs not only to science but to memory, myth and nightmare. Kill the word we rarely want to say aloud because it feels sharp, final, unyielding. Half a fraction so immense that it transforms into disbelief. And Europe, a whole continent, villages and cities, mountains and valleys, from icy north to sun-warmed south, all caught in the same shadow, the echo of a question. When we say this question aloud, we are not the first. It has been whispered for centuries. Priests asked it in their prayers. How, O Lord, could so many perish? Doctors of the time asked it in their confusion. How is it spreading? What is this invisible enemy? Families asked it as they buried their dead. How can death move so quickly? From house to house. And later, long after the candles had burned out and the bodies had been laid to rest, scholars asked it again with ink and parchment. How could a disease so small destroy something so vast? And now we, in our modern world, with our microscopes and our vaccines, ask it once more, not because we fear it in the same way, but because it still carries the mystery of enormity. It still forces us to admit that fragility has always walked beside us. The shape of the mystery. There are, of course, answers. We know today about the bacterium Yersinia pestis. We know about fleas and rats, about ships arriving in harbours, about trade routes carrying more than silk and spice. We know the symptoms: swollen buboes, fevers, chills, death. often within days. Science gives us a story of cause and effect, of microbe and host. But the central question, how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe, is not only about science, it is about scale. It is about the way an invisible presence reshaped landscapes, economies, cultures, and even faith. The question is less about the mechanism and more about the mystery of magnitude. How can something smaller than the eye can see topple cities? How can something carried on the back of a rat redraw the map of history? How can life change so quickly, so absolutely, that within a single decade half of everything that was familiar is gone? Holding the question, we will not rush to answer. To answer too quickly would be to flatten the story into a chart, a diagram, a fact that fits into a textbook. But the Black Plague is not a chart. It is not a diagram. It is a wound in the memory of humanity, and wounds must be approached gently. So instead, let us hold the question in our hands for a while. Imagine it as a small dark stone, smooth, cold, weighty. You turn it over, and each side shows something different. Science, faith, despair, resilience. You cannot see the entire stone at once. You must turn it slowly, carefully, and even then it remains partly hidden. That is how we will travel, not by rushing to the answer, but by exploring the stone one side at a time. The whisper of numbers, half of Europe. The phrase feels almost impossible. Half. In a classroom, the number may be neat, 50%. But in life, it means neighbors, families, villages where every second door is closed forever. It means fields without farmers, markets without voices, cathedrals where the choir has fallen silent. Imagine a modern city, half its people gone. Imagine your own street, half the houses, empty shutters, drawn grass growing wild in gardens left untended. Imagine your own family half missing from the table, their chairs pushed back, their laughter now only an echo. That is what the number means. And so when we ask, how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe, we are asking how emptiness could spread so far, so fast, that it became the new normal, the shadow of belief. For those who lived through it, the question was not answered with science, but with belief. Many believed it was the wrath of God. Others thought it was the alignment of planets, the corruption of air, the punishment for sins. Still, others whispered that it was brought by strangers, outsiders, people who did not belong. The question was the same, but the answers shifted like smoke. Each answer revealed more about fear than about truth, and perhaps that is still true today. When we face disasters, when we face events larger than ourselves, our first instinct is not to calculate, but to believe, to reach for meaning, to find a story that makes sense of what cannot be controlled. The space between knowing and not knowing here, in the quiet of night. We stand in the space between knowing and not knowing. We know more than those who lived through the plague. We have microscopes, antibiotics, theories of disease. But we also know less because we cannot fully step into their world. We cannot breathe their air, feel their fear, or live with the uncertainty that every cough, every shadow, every breeze might be carrying death. That is why the question remains powerful, not because we lack data, but because data alone cannot carry the full weight of what happened. The question is a bridge spanning centuries, inviting us to walk slowly from their time into ours. A candle in the dark. Imagine again that you are holding a candle in the middle of a cathedral. The vast space rises around you. Arches, stained glass echoes. The candlelight is small, fragile, flickering. The darkness is immense. When we ask, how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe, we are that candle. We illuminate small parts, the science, the stories, the statistics. But the darkness remains vast surrounding us, reminding us that no matter how much light we hold, there is always more shadow. And yet the candle is enough. It does not conquer the dark, but it gives us a circle of space in which to stand, to breathe, to see. That is what the question does. It does not solve everything, but it gives us a place to reflect, preparing for the journey ahead. So let us not rush to extinguish the question with quick answers. Let us instead allow it to guide us gently into the layers of this story. We will move through science, through myth, through philosophy, We will walk in markets and monasteries, through forests and villages, through the silence of plague pits and the whispers of survivors. Each part will add another thread to the tapestry, another side to the stone. For now, let the question linger in the air around you. How did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? Hear it as a whisper, as a tolling bell, as a gentle echo. It is the anchor of this journey, and everything else will circle around it. Closing the part, the candle burns lower, the question remains, the night continues, and we are only beginning. The night is still here with us. The candle flickers, the air rests heavy with quiet. And now, before we step further into the darkened streets of history, I would like to pause not for facts, not for numbers, but for you. Yes, you listening right now. Because this story, vast as it is only alive when it reaches someone's ear, someone's heart. It lives in you as much as it lives in the archives of the past. So let me ask, where are you listening from tonight? Are you curled up in bed, the blanket pulled close, a soft pillow beneath your head? Or are you in a chair, maybe near a window, with the cool night air slipping through a crack in the frame? Perhaps you're traveling on a bus, on a train, headphones carrying this quiet voice as the world moves quickly outside while inside your mind slows down. Or maybe it isn't even night. Maybe the sun is still high, but you found this moment in the middle of your day, a pause between tasks, a space where time bends enough to let curiosity breathe. Wherever you are, however you are part of this moment. A listener in the 21st century leaning gently toward the echoes of the 14th. A life here and now reaching softly toward lives that ended long ago. This is the strange, beautiful bridge that history builds across centuries, across languages, across silence itself. The shared breath. Take a slow breath with me. In, hold, and out. It does not matter if we are separated by distance, by city, by country. For this moment our breathing is the same. The rhythm of life is the same. The pause after the exhale is the same. In that pause we are together. And perhaps that is the first answer to the unspoken fear that lingers in this story. The Black Plague divided people between the living and the dead, between the healthy and the sick, between those inside the house and those outside. But here, in this quiet, you and I are not divided. We are joined simply by listening, by breathing. A soft invitation. If you find comfort in this kind of exploration, in a pace that is slow enough to let your mind wander in questions that do not demand answers, but simply sit beside you like old friends, I invite you gently, with no urgency, to stay with me. You might press a small button, the one that says like, or subscribe, or share. Not because there is pressure, but because it helps this quiet corner of calm find others who might also need it. Imagine it as leaving a candle in the window of a dark street. Someone passing by might see the glow pause and feel less alone. That is what your gesture does. It tells the algorithms, those invisible guides of the digital age, that there is warmth here, and that others might want to step inside. The listener's world. I wonder what the room around you looks like. Is there a lamp glowing softly, a cup of tea cooling nearby, a phone screen dimming the edges of sleep approaching? Or maybe you are in the middle of noise, children in the other room, traffic outside, a clock ticking a little too loudly. Even so, this voice, these words offer a pocket of stillness inside the storm. It does not matter if your world tonight is quiet or restless, neat or messy, light or dark. The story accepts you as you are. The past does not require perfection. It only asks for attention. The timeless companion. There is something intimate about listening. A voice in your ear. A thought that travels from one mind to another, skipping across centuries. In this way, I am not just a narrator and you are not just an audience. We are companions on a nighttime walk. The path may be dark, the air may be heavy, but we walk together. Think of how medieval people once sat around fires telling stories to pass the long nights. They could not have imagined you here now listening with a device that fits into your hand. Yet the feeling is the same. A voice carried into the dark, a spark of company against the silence. The small act of choosing. It may seem small, pressing play staying here listening, but it is an act of choice. You chose this, instead of scrolling endlessly, instead of letting noise fill the silence. You chose curiosity. You chose calm. That matters. So let this choice be gentle but intentional. Stay with me as we move deeper. Let each word be like a step, not rushed, not forced, just a step into the corridor of time, rest and readiness. If you are lying down, let your body sink a little deeper into whatever supports you. Feel the mattress, the pillow, the blanket. Notice how gravity is not an enemy but a cradle. If you are sitting, let your spine soften, your shoulders fall, your hands rest. If you are traveling, let the rhythm of wheels, of footsteps, of motion become part of the background lull. Wherever you are, let this story become a kind of lullaby. Not a lullaby for children, but for minds too full, too tired, too curious. A lullaby made of history, of memory, of the slow unfolding of questions. The path ahead. And as we rest here connected across space and time, we can look gently toward what lies ahead. The streets of Florence, the ports of Genoa, the fields of England, the monasteries of France. We will visit them together. We will see how the plague crept into homes, how it silenced markets, how it reshaped belief. We will not rush. We will not overwhelm. We will walk step by step, candle by candle. But before we begin that walk, I wanted you to know that you are not only a listener, you are a companion. Without you, the story is just words floating in the void. With you, it is alive, present, shared. A closing whisper. So once more, I invite you gently, softly to stay, to breathe with me, to walk slowly with me. And if you wish to light a candle in this little corner of the digital night, you may do so with a like, with a subscription, with a comment that says, simply, I am here and I am listening. That is enough. More than enough. The candle burns on. The night holds steady. And the question, the heavy, haunting question of the Black Plague waits for us patient, ready. Close your eyes for a moment if you wish. Let the present soften. The clock on your wall, the phone on your nightstand, the noise of your day, they belong to this thin slice of time we call now. But history stretches far beyond it. To understand the Black Plague, to even begin to feel its weight, we must step back, far back. So far that the scale of our ordinary lives begins to blur, and the centuries open up like pages in a book too heavy to hold in your hands. A ribbon of years. Imagine that all of human history, the written history, the stories carved into stone or painted on parchment, was laid out like a long ribbon. On one end, the earlier cities rise, Mesopotamia, the Nile, the Indus, the Yellow River. On the other, our own era glows with electricity and satellites. And somewhere in the middle, the ribbon darkens, stained by an event that nearly tore the fabric of society apart. That dark stain is the Black Plague. To us, it feels far away, medieval Europe, cloaked in superstition, echoing with bells and prayers. But in the sweep of time, it is not so distant. Barely 7 centuries separate their world from ours. In geological terms, it is a blink. Even in the age of civilizations, it is not so long ago. If Earth's story were a single day, the plague would have struck just a few heartbeats before midnight. The fragility of scale. Our lives are measured in decades. A human lifetime, 70, 80, maybe 90 years, is long enough to feel full, yet short enough to vanish quickly in the river of centuries. And so when we hear that the plague killed half of Europe, we must remember for the people who lived through it, it was not history. It was not a statistic. It was their lifetime, compressed, crushed, altered. To stand in the 14th century was to live in a world that felt solid, enduring. Cathedrals rising stone by stone, markets bustling, fields stretching toward the horizon, kings and queens ruling with certainty that their lineages would continue forever. And then in the space of a few years that illusion collapsed. What felt permanent was revealed to be fragile. What felt stable was revealed to be trembling. The long rhythm of Earth. The Earth itself has seen countless ages, countless catastrophes. Entire species have vanished, entire landscapes reshaped. To the planet, the Black Plague is one more tremor in the long rhythm of change. But to humanity, it was something different. It was the first time in remembered history that death swept not as a local tragedy, not as a passing famine or battle, but as a continental shadow. Think of the dinosaurs ruling for millions of years undone in a geological instant. Think of ice ages carving valleys, seas rising, and falling mountains crumbling. Compared to these, the plague was brief, just a handful of years. But for us bound to our short lifespans, it was everything. It was the measure of existence, the question of survival. The 14th century world. Step back with me into Europe before the plague. The year is 1340. The continent is alive with sound and motion. Bells ring from churches. Horses clatter on cobblestones. Markets chatter with voices, merchants, farmers, children weaving between stalls. Ships arrive at harbours, heavy with goods from faraway lands. This is a world already in motion, tied together by trade routes that stretch across seas and deserts. A world that believes itself stable, though it has cracks, wars brewing, famines, lingering faith being tested. And into this web of life, something invisible is waiting to arrive. Something small enough to ride unnoticed in the fur of a rat, yet strong enough to slice through the population of an entire continent. The perspective of generations. Pause for a moment and consider your own life. Think of your grandparents, their memories, their stories. Think of your great-grandparents, perhaps names you have heard but faces you have never seen. That distance 3-4 generations feels far, and yet the Black Plague is only about 25 such distances away. Just 25 hands passing memory from parent to child, and you are there. That is how close it island. It is humbling. It reminds us that history is not buried. It is beneath our feet, close enough to reach if we stretch far enough. The illusion of permanence. People of the 14th century believed their world would last. They built cathedrals meant to stand for eternity, wrote manuscripts to preserve wisdom for generations, carved stone to remember their dead forever. And yet when the plague came, the illusion cracked. The permanence of stone meant nothing against the fragility of flesh. The bells tolled not for centuries, but for hours, for days, for the next funeral already waiting. This is why the Black Plague still haunts us. Because it reminds us that no matter how solid our world feels, it can be shaken. No matter how permanent our cities seem, they are vulnerable. And no matter how long we dream of living, time is not ours to command. The telescope of time. Imagine holding a telescope, but instead of looking at stars, you turn it around and look into the past. The farther you focus, the smaller the people become. Villages shrink, roads vanish, centuries blur. And then suddenly the image sharpens. A street in Florence. A cart rolling slowly carrying the dead. The telescope has stopped at the 14th century, and the image refuses to move. That is what history does. It is a telescope into time. It reminds us that the past is not gone. It is simply smaller, farther, waiting for us to adjust the lens. Preparing the mind. Before we walk into the specifics, into the rats and fleas, into the microbes and myths, we must prepare our minds to hold the scale. Half of Europe. Millions gone. Not just names on paper, but lives with laughter, fears and dreams. Farmers and kings, children and priests, merchants and mothers, all caught in the same wave. So breathe again slowly. Let the weight of time settle gently, not harshly. You are not standing in that century. You are standing outside it, looking in safe. But by holding the vastness of time, by stepping back, you allow yourself to feel the true magnitude of what happened. Closing this frame, the earth continues its slow rotation. The candle continues to burn. Our lives continue to move forward, heartbeat by heartbeat. And yet behind us, stretching like a shadow, is the memory of centuries. When we ask, how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? We must hold both scales at once. The short scale of lives cut short, and the long scale of history where entire civilizations rise and fall. Only then can we begin to see the full shape of the story. This is the vast frame of time. This is the horizon against which the plague will unfold. The question lingers like mist in the air. How did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? To approach an answer, we must look closely, so closely that our eyes alone are not enough. We must shrink our imagination until we can see what cannot be seen, the world of the microscopic, the unseen enemy, In the 14th century, no one knew the word bacterium. No one had lenses powerful enough to glimpse the invisible world swarming all around them. They saw symptoms, swellings, fevers, death. They felt terror. But the cause remained hidden like a shadow behind a curtain. Today we can lift that curtain. The Black Plague was driven by a single species of bacteria, Yersinia pestis. The name is quiet clinical, yet behind it lies a force so devastating it reshaped the human story. Imagine it, a microscopic rod so small that thousands could line up across a single grain of sand, harmless to the eye, weightless to the hand. Yet within its tiny body lies the power to unravel societies, to collapse villages, to silence entire cities. Fleas and rats. But Yersinia pestis did not travel alone. It needed carriers. It needed hosts. And it found them in the fleas that bit rats, and in the rats that scurried through barns, ships, and marketplaces. Picture a medieval port city. Wooden ships arrive heavy with goods, grain, cloth, spice. With the goods come rats, uninvited travellers. With the rats come fleas feeding on their blood. And inside the fleas the bacteria wait, multiplying silently. When a flea bites, it regurgitates, releasing the bacteria into a new body. Sometimes another rat, sometimes a human. The bite is tiny, barely noticed. Yet from that pinprick of contact, entire families could fall ill within days. The web of trade. The plague did not appear in Europe by magic. It rode along the arteries of trade. From the steppes of Asia, through caravans across deserts, into the ports of the Mediterranean. What once carried silk and knowledge now carried death. Think of the trade routes as veins pulsing with the lifeblood of connection. Goods, ideas, cultures, all flowed along them. But the same veins that nourished society also gave disease a perfect path. A single infected rat on a ship could seed an entire outbreak. A single marketplace could become the epicenter of thousands of deaths. Symptoms, the body's alarm. When Yersinia pestis entered a human, the body responded with alarm. Buboes, swollen, painful lumps rose in the armpits, the groin, the neck. Fever surged. Chills racked the body. In many cases, death arrived in just a few days. The bubonic form was most common. But there were others, septicemic, invading the blood, directly darkening skin with patches of decay, pneumonic infecting the lungs, spreading not by flea bites but by breath, by cough, by the very air between people. In the silence of a medieval home, the difference between a cough and a sigh could mean everything. Why it spread so quickly? The conditions of the 14th century were perfect for disaster. Crowded towns, narrow streets, homes of wood and straw, food stored poorly, waste thrown into alleys. Rats found abundance, fleas found hosts, and people unaware of the danger lived in close quarters, breathing the same air, touching the same goods, sharing the same wells. Add to this the movement of armies and traders, the gatherings at fairs and markets, the prayers in crowded churches. Every meeting became a risk. Every journey carried invisible passengers. It was not just a disease, it was a network of contagion, hidden in the fabric of daily life. The silence of the invisible paused for a moment, and imagine what it must have felt like. People could not see the cause. They could not understand the chain of infection. They only saw neighbours fall, families vanish, carts roll past with the dead. To them the plague was everywhere and nowhere, an invisible fog that chose victims at random. That is part of why fear grew so immense. Fear thrives in uncertainty, and in the 14th century, uncertainty was all they had, science without harshness. Today we can trace the plague with charts, with DNA analysis from the teeth of ancient victims, with models of epidemiology. But here in this quiet telling, let us not turn it into a harsh lecture. Let us treat science as another candle lighting a corner of the dark. What matters is not only that Yersinia pestis existed or that fleas and rats carried it. What matters is how such tiny agents revealed the fragility of human structures. How they slipped past walls and borders, how they mocked wealth and power, how they reduced kings and peasants alike to equal prey. An image to hold picture it this way. A grain of wheat falls from a sack in a ship's hold. A rat scurries to nibble at it. A flea leaps onto the rat, feeds and carries bacteria in its gut. Days later, the rat dies, the flea leaps to a human leg, bites and transfers the infection. Within a week, the human dies. Within a month, the family is gone. Within a year, the city is grieving. Within a decade, Europe is transformed. From one grain of wheat, one rat, one flea, one bite, the shadow spreads, preparing for the next step. So how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? The foundation of the answer is here. A bacterium, a flea, a rat, a network of trade, and a world unprepared. That is the science. But the story is larger. It is also myth, philosophy, despair, and survival. We will move there soon. But for now, hold this small, unsettling truth. Sometimes the greatest forces in history are not the armies or the kings, but the invisible passengers hiding in fur and blood. The science of the plague was invisible to those who lived through it. No one in the 14th century could whisper the word bacterium. No one knew of fleas and rats carrying hidden passengers. What they had instead were stories, symbols, and explanations shaped not by microscopes but by fear and faith. Wrath from above. For many, the Black Plague was God's punishment. Churches filled with prayers, candles, incense. Confessions spilled into the air, as though words alone might stop the shadow. Priests spoke of sin, of a world that had wandered too far from righteousness. To some, the plague was the hand of divine justice pressing upon humanity. Imagine yourself in that world. No antibiotics, no doctors who could offer cures. The only explanations you hear are spoken from pulpits, that humanity has failed, that heaven has sent this sickness to remind us of mortality. In the tolling of bells, people heard not only death, but judgment. The poisoned air others turned their eyes skyward, not to heaven but to the stars. Astrologers declared that the planets had aligned in a way that corrupted the air. Physicians spoke of miasma foul vapors drifting through towns, poisoning lungs. To combat this, people lit fires in the streets, burned herbs, carried posies of flowers pressed to their noses. The rhyme you may still know, ring, a ring of roses, a pocket full of posies, is often remembered as a relic of those beliefs. Children sang it centuries later, not knowing it may have once been tied to fear of poisoned air, the outsider's blame. And then there were darker explanations. Whispers spread that outsiders were to blame foreigners, travellers, those who worship differently. In many towns, Jewish communities were accused of poisoning wells, of bringing sickness intentionally. Violence followed fear. Pogroms erupted. Thousands were killed, not by plague, but by neighbours who sought a human enemy for an invisible disaster. This too is part of the story, that fear left unanswered can turn cruelty into ritual. The plague was not only a disease of the body, but a disease of trust, corroding the bonds between communities. The plague doctor. When images of the Black Plague are shown today, one symbol rises above all others: the plague doctor. The long dark robe, the wide-brimmed hat, and most striking of all, the beaked mask. In reality, this costume appeared later in the 17th century, not the height of the 14th, yet it has become inseparable from our imagination of the plague. The beak was stuffed with herbs and spices, thought to purify the air. The mask turned the doctor into something almost inhuman, half bird, half omen, a figure of both help and dread. Imagine the sight: a tall figure in black, the beak glinting in dim light, moving slowly through silent streets. To the sick, perhaps it meant hope. To the fearful, it looked like death itself had taken human form. The dance of death. Another symbol spread across Europe in art and song. The dance macabre, the dance of death. In murals painted on church walls, skeletons led kings and peasants alike in a grim procession. No one was spared. Crown and crownless, rich and poor, young and old, all held hands with death and moved in the same circle. It was a reminder, carved in stone and painted in colour, that the plague did not discriminate. Death was the great equalizer. Even today, echoes of the dance of death survive in literature, in theatre, in the way we still use skeletons as symbols of mortality. It is a reminder that when words failed, art stepped in to give shape to the unseeable. The power of symbols. Why did these images matter? Because when the cause was invisible, people reached for symbols to make sense of what they could not control. They lit fires against poisoned air. They wore charms and amulets. They painted murals of skeletons and angels. They whispered prayers and blamed strangers. Each action was a way of holding the darkness at bay. Science was not available to them. Stories were, beliefs were, symbols were, and so, alongside the bacteria and the fleas, another plague spread, a plague of meaning, of explanation, of myth. A gentle reflection pause here with me. Imagine the silence of a medieval village at night, families huddled in their homes, a mother pressing herbs to her child's chest, a priest whispering prayers over a dying man, a traveller shunned at the edge of town, a mural being painted skeletons holding hands with kings. Each scene is an attempt to answer the same question: why is this happening? And though the answers were not true in the scientific sense, they were true in another way. They reveal the human need to weave story into suffering, to find meaning even in catastrophe. The layer beneath. Today we can look back and see clearly bacteria, fleas, rats, ships. But if we ignore the symbols, the myths, the beliefs, we miss the deeper truth. The Black Plague was not only a biological event, it was a cultural storm reshaping not only populations but imaginations. The skeletons of the Danse Macabre still grin at us from the margins of medieval manuscripts. The beaked masks still haunt us in costumes and images. The echoes of prayers and accusations still linger in the archives. The Black Plague left scars not only in graveyards but in culture. Closing the part. So, how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? Not only with bacteria, but with fear. Not only with death, but with stories about death. As we move forward, we will see how science and myth intertwine, how facts and symbols dance together. But for now, let the images linger. The beaked mask, the skeleton's dance, the burning herbs, the prayers in the night. These are as much a part of the plague as the fleas and the rats. The candle burns low. The myths still whisper, and the story moves on. The candle still flickers. The myths and symbols we spoke of, wrath from above, poisoned air, the dance of death, linger in the imagination. But now we turn our gaze back to the ground beneath those stories, to the physical paths by which the plague travelled. For even the most powerful myth is often anchored in something concrete, something that can be traced, measured, touched. And so we ask, if the plague began far away, how did it come to Europe? How did it step from village to village, until the map of a continent was covered in shadow? The first arrival historians often trace the plague's European arrival to the year 1347, the scene a bustling port in the Mediterranean, Genoa, or Messina, or Marseille. Ships rolled into harbour heavy with goods, grain, cloth, spices. But among the cargo were passengers. No one had invited: rats carrying fleas, fleas carrying Yersinia pestis. Imagine the harbour at dawn. Seagulls wheel above. Dock workers shout, ropes creak, crates thud onto stone. The air smells of salt and fish. No one notices the small bodies slipping down ropes, scurrying into warehouses. Within days the first fevers appear. Within weeks the town is reeling. News spreads, though not fast enough. Other ships sail, other ports open their gates, and with them the invisible contagion steps ashore. The explosion of symptoms. Once inside the human body, the plague announced itself with brutal clarity. First came the fever, sudden and high, then the chills, the aching limbs, the exhaustion, and then, unmistakable, the buboes, swollen, darkened lumps in the groin, the armpits, the neck. Painful, grotesque, often fatal. In some, the infection spread into the blood septicemic plague, bringing black patches to the skin, fingertips and toes, darkening whole limbs, losing life. In others, it entered the lungs, pneumonic plague, making every breath a weapon, every cough a possible death sentence for those nearby. To a medieval family, it must have felt like betrayal by the body itself. One day, a neighbour laughed at market. The next, he coughed, collapsed, and by morning he was gone. The network of towns Europe in the 14th century was not a sealed landscape. Roads, crisscrossed fields and forests connecting villages to towns, towns to cities, cities to ports. Pilgrims walked to holy shrines. Traders hauled carts of goods. Messengers carried letters. Soldiers marched. Every path was a thread, and the plague wove itself across them like a dark tapestry. Picture the map of Europe lit with lanterns for each town. Slowly, one by one, the lights dim. Messina, Marseille, Genoa, Venice. Then Florence, Paris, London. A continent flickering out. The speed of the shadow. The plague spread with terrifying speed. In some regions it moved 30-40 kilometers a day. Entire towns were struck down within weeks of first contact. Villages emptied so quickly that crops withered in the fields, cattle wandered untended, markets fell silent. Travelers became both victims and vectors. A merchant might survive long enough to ride from one town to another, carrying fleas in his clothing. A soldier might march for days before collapsing, leaving behind the seeds of contagion in every camp he passed. It was as if death itself had mounted a horse and galloped across Europe. The case of Florence. Let us pause at one city, one of the most famous, Florence, Italy. In 1348, the plague struck with devastating force. Chroniclers wrote that whole families vanished within days. The wealthy fled to the countryside, but the sickness followed them there. Bodies piled faster than graves could be dug. Priests could not keep up with last rites. Bells tolled until the sound itself became unbearable. Giovanni Boccaccio, who survived the plague, wrote of it in the Decameron. He described houses, abandoned animals wandering through streets, neighbors, too afraid to approach each other. He spoke of mothers abandoning children, husbands abandoning wives, so deep was the terror of contagion. Florence was not unique, but its story shows the scale. A city known for its art, its wealth, its faith, brought to its knees by something smaller than the eye could see. The silence of villages. While cities wrote their chronicles, villages mostly vanished without record. A cluster of houses, a field of grain, a chapel at the center wiped out so completely that no one remained to tell the tale. Archaeologists sometimes find these places empty foundations, forgotten grave pits, fragments of pottery. The silence is their only testimony. Imagine walking through such a place centuries later. Grass sways where children once played. Stones lie scattered where walls once stood. The air is quiet but heavy with memory. This too is part of the case study, the story of the forgotten, the relentless cycle. Every outbreak followed a cycle. Arrival, first fevers, rapid deaths, fear, flight, and then spread again. Those who fled often carried the disease with them, seeding new outbreaks. The attempt to escape became the mechanism of contagion. It is a cruel paradox. The instinct to run to survive often ensured the opposite. Why it could not be stopped? Looking back, we might ask, why did no one stop it? Why no quarantines, no borders, no cures? The answer lies in the knowledge of the time. Without understanding bacteria, without microscopes, people fought shadows with candles. They lit fires, burned herbs, prayed louder, but the fleas still bit, the rats still scurried, the bacteria still multiplied. Even when some cities tried quarantine, locking ships in harbour, isolating the sick, the measures came late, imperfect, and often ignored. The world was simply not ready. A reflection pause again. Let us not drown in numbers. Let us instead imagine one small scene: a ship anchored in Marseille, its crew sick, its rats already on shore. A week later, a market closes. A month later, the city is reeling. A year later, France mourns thousands. From one ship, a continent trembles. Closing this case study. And so when we ask how the Black Plague killed half of Europe, one answer is this: through ships and ports, through roads and villages, through lungs and blood. Through the ordinary paths of human connection that became extraordinary corridors of death. Science gives us clarity now. Bacteria, fleas, rats, contagion. But in the 14th century, all they saw was speed, silence, and despair. The candle burns lower, the map of Europe dims, and we step forward deeper into the shadow. The candle burns low. The map of Europe lies heavy in our minds, dotted with ships, villages, and grave pits. We have spoken of bacteria and fleas, of ships and markets. But beneath the facts lies something deeper. the questions the plague forced humanity to ask of itself. Because the Black Plague was never only about sickness. It was about what it means to be alive, what it means to be fragile, what it means to live in a world where tomorrow is not promised. The shock of fragility human beings walk through life with an unspoken assumption that tomorrow will be much like today. The baker will bake, the farmer will sow, the bell will toll for worship, not for funerals. And yet in the years of the plague, that assumption shattered. Imagine waking each morning, unsure if your body already carried the sickness. Imagine watching your neighbor fall one day, your family the next, yourself perhaps soon after. The illusion of permanence dissolved, replaced by the raw truth. Life is fragile and death can arrive without warning. This realization is both terrifying and clarifying. Terrifying because it strips away comfort. Clarifying because it reveals the essence of what matters. Questions that have no easy answers. The people of the 14th century asked questions we still whisper today. Why do we suffer? Why do some live while others die? Is there meaning in catastrophe? Or is it only chaos? Some turned to faith for answers, believing the plague was divine punishment. Others doubted, asking how a loving God could allow children to perish. Some embraced hedonism, living for pleasure since tomorrow might never come. Others embraced asceticism, renouncing everything, hoping purity would protect them. The plague was not only a biological crisis, but a philosophical one. It pushed people to the edges of their beliefs, forcing them to confront mysteries too large for certainty. The mirror of mortality. There is a saying, death is the mirror that makes us see clearly. The Black Plague held up that mirror to all of Europe. Kings saw that their crowns could not shield them. Merchants saw that their wealth could not buy escape. Peasants saw that their labor could not guarantee tomorrow. All were equal before the shadow. In that mirror, some saw despair. Others saw opportunity to live differently, to love more deeply, to pray more sincerely. Death as a teacher, as harsh as it was, reminded the living of the value of each breath. The philosophy of impermanence. The plague's lesson was not new. Philosophers across cultures had long spoken of impermanence. In Buddhist thought, all things arise and pass away. In Stoic philosophy, death is natural and inevitable, to be accepted with calm. In Christian teaching, earthly life is but a passage to eternity. But when theory became reality, when impermanence was no longer a word in a book but a grave outside the door, the philosophy was no longer abstract. It was lived, embodied, undeniable. Every cough became a meditation. Every candle flame became a reminder. Every sunset felt like a gift. The weight of meaning. What does it mean to live in a time when life is uncertain? Perhaps it means we cling harder to meaning. People of the plague years wrote prayers, painted murals, carved tombs, sang songs. They created beauty in the midst of horror, as if to insist that life could still shine even in shadow. And perhaps that is what we still do. When disaster strikes, whether epidemic, war, or personal grief, we reach for story, for art, for philosophy, not because it removes the pain, but because it gives the pain a shape we can carry. A gentle reflection for now. Pause with me here. In your own life, you may not face the Black Plague, but you know fragility. You have seen days where certainty crumbled, where health faltered, where plans dissolved. You have asked even silently, why now? Why me? What does this mean? The people of the 14th century were not so different from you. Their questions are your questions. Their fears are your fears. Their search for meaning is the same search you carry in quieter moments. The lesson that lingers. So how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? Not only with bacteria, but with questions. It killed bodies, but it also stripped illusions. It left survivors standing in a world transformed not only by death, but by a deeper awareness of life's impermanence. The lesson is harsh, but also tender. We are fragile, and in that fragility lies the beauty of every breath, every smile, every dawn. Closing this part. The candle is almost gone. The flame wavers, small but steady. In its light we see not only the science of plague, but the philosophy of being human. Tomorrow may not be promised. But tonight, here in this quiet moment, you are alive. You are breathing. You are part of the unbroken thread that stretches from the 14th century to now, that is meaning enough. The science has spoken, the philosophy has whispered, and now let us pause once more, not in numbers, not in doctrines, but in feeling. Because the Black Plague was not only something people thought about, it was something they lived hour by hour, breath by breath. To draw closer, we must imagine ourselves there. We must step into the hush of a single room, the silence of a single street, the tremor of a single heart, the sound of bells. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the sound of a bell in the distance, deep, resonant, carried on the wind. In the 14th century, bells marked everything: the start of the day, the call to prayer, the announcement of joy, the toll of death. During the plague, the bells tolled more often. Their sound was not only a rhythm of time, but a reminder that life was leaving again and again. Imagine lying in your bed at night, hearing that bell, knowing it meant another neighbor was gone. The sound would seep into your dreams until even silence felt heavy with its echo. The glow of a candle. Now picture the glow of a candle. Wax softening flame, flickering shadows bending on the wall. Candles were not only light, they were prayer, memory protection. Families lit them for the sick, for the dead, for the hope of dawn. Imagine sitting at a wooden table, the room dim except for that single flame. Your child coughs. Your spouse whispers a prayer. Outside the street is empty. Inside the candle is all you have. Its small circle of light is the only barrier between you and the darkness that feels endless. The weight of silence. Silence can be gentle like the hush before sleep. But during the plague, silence was different. It was the absence of footsteps on the street, the absence of laughter at the market, the absence of song in the church. Imagine walking outside and hearing nothing but the wind. No chatter, no greetings. Only the shuffle of a cart carrying bodies, the creak of its wheels, the loudest sound in the village. Silence became a presence, a companion that followed every step. The memory of touch. Think of your own life, the comfort of a hand on your shoulder, the warmth of an embrace, the casual brush of someone passing by. During the plague, touch became dangerous. To touch was to risk death. Families pulled away from each other. Neighbors kept distance. The simplest human gesture, a hug, a handshake, became heavy with fear. Imagine how lonely that must have felt, to need comfort most when comfort was most dangerous. A fragment of personal life. Let us build one small scene together. You are in a village in France, the year 1348. The sun has just set. Your home is quiet, except for the faint sound of your younger brother coughing. Your mother lights a candle and sets it by the window. Your father sharpens a tool, though he has no work left to do. Outside, the street is empty except for the church bell that tolls once, twice, 3 times. You press your hand against the wooden table. The grain is rough. The wax drips slowly. The cough grows weaker. You feel fear rising not as a scream but as a weight in your chest. You whisper a prayer, though you are not sure who hears it. You close your eyes, hoping morning will come, hoping your family will still be whole when it does. That was life during the plague. Not only the statistics of millions, but the quiet ache of one family, one room, one night. A mirror for the listener. And now return to your own life. What sounds surround you? A fan humming, a clock ticking, a car passing outside. What light glows in your room? A lamp, a screen, a candle. What silence wraps around you? For a moment let your room become a bridge to theirs. You are safe here, yes. You are far from the 14th century. But you can feel echoes, the weight of silence, the glow of a candle, the sound of something constant, then a pause, then stillness. This is reflection, not to relive their suffering, but to notice the threads that connect us. The gentle lesson of empathy. Why pause in this way? Because empathy is a kind of time travel. It allows us to stand beside those long gone, not to change their fate, but to honor their humanity. To remember that they were not numbers, but people with feelings as delicate, as real as yours. The plague reminds us that empathy itself is a form of survival. When fear tempts us to turn away, empathy keeps us connected. When history risks becoming abstract, empathy makes it personal. Closing the reflection. The bell has faded, the candle has burned low, the silence has deepened, but the memory remains. When we ask, how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? We must answer not only with science and philosophy, but also with personal reflection, with the sound of bells, the glow of candles, the ache of silence, the longing for touch. These are the small details that made up the great catastrophe. These are the threads of humanity woven through the fabric of history. And tonight, as you listen, they remind you not only of their fragility, but of your own presence here, now breathing, resting alive. The bell has tolled. The candle has burned low. The silence has deepened. We have walked through the science of the plague, the myths that surrounded it, the personal echoes of fear, and the vast frame of time. The story feels immense, almost certain in its weight. And yet history is rarely so simple. Even in catastrophe, there are questions, doubts, disagreements. So tonight we pause to listen to those other voices, the voices that whisper, was it truly half of Europe? Was it truly so sudden? Can numbers tell the whole story? The fragility of numbers. When we say half of Europe, the phrase falls heavy, but it is also slippery. In the 14th century, there were no censuses as we know them today. No continent-wide surveys, no central archives collecting exact counts of the dead. What we have are chronicles, parish records, tax rolls, burial pits. Fragments of data often written in haste, often incomplete, sometimes exaggerated. Imagine a priest keeping a register. Day after day, more names. At first he writes carefully, ink flowing in neat lines. But as deaths multiply, his hand grows tired, his pages rushed. Sometimes he writes many died instead of names. Sometimes he leaves gaps. Sometimes he himself succumbs, and the record ends mid-sentence. How do we count the uncountable? Scholars debate. Modern historians estimate that between 1/3 and 1/2 of Europe's population perished. Some lean toward the higher number. Others caution that the true figure may have been less. Still, others suggest that in some regions mortality was closer to 70%, while in others it was far lower. The truth is uneven. Cities often suffered more than countryside, ports more than inland villages, poorer communities more than the wealthy, though the wealthy were far from safe. The plague was not a single uniform wave, but a storm with shifting intensities. And so, when we speak of half, we speak in averages, in broad strokes. It is a haunting phrase, yes, but it is also a simplification. The blind spots of evidence archaeology gives us clues. Mass graves tell of sudden death. Layers of soil reveal hurried burials. DNA in ancient teeth confirms the presence of Yersinia pestis. Yet even here gaps remain. Not every grave has been found. Not every village has been studied. The silence of the dead is vast, and we hold only fragments. Consider a small village wiped out entirely. No survivors left to write. No records preserved. Centuries later, its stones are scattered, its graves hidden beneath fields. Its story is gone except for faint traces in the soil. Multiply that by hundreds of villages, and you see why certainty eludes us. The temptation of certainty. There is a human desire to fix numbers, to make them clear, definite, to say, it was exactly this many. It was exactly half. Numbers give shape to chaos. They allow us to point and say, here is the measure of suffering. But certainty is often a comfort, not a truth. History resists neat totals. Life and death are not always countable. In this way, the plague teaches us another lesson, that sometimes the most honest answer is humility. Was it truly so sudden? Another debate arises. Some chronicles describe whole towns collapsing in days, bodies lying in streets, survivors fleeing in terror. Other records suggest a slower burn, months of sickness, waves returning year after year. Which was true? Perhaps both. Disease spreads unevenly. In some places it tore through like fire in dry grass. In others it smouldered, faded, returned. Memory compresses time. For those who lived it, even a few weeks could feel like an eternity of fear. And so the image of sudden collapse may be true in some cases, exaggerated in others, but always faithful to the emotional truth of those who endured it. Beyond numbers, but perhaps the most important critique is this: numbers alone cannot capture the reality of the Black Plague. Whether 1/3, 1/2, or 2/3, the meaning is not in the percentage. It is in the emptiness left behind, in the abandoned houses, the fields gone wild, the bells tolling too often. Whether half or less, the impact was the same. Societies transformed, economies reshaped, beliefs unsettled, art and culture forever altered. A gentle disagreement. So when we repeat the phrase half of Europe, let us also remember the quiet disagreement it carries. Historians caution us the figure is a shadow, not a precise line. The truth is jagged, uneven, blurred. But does that make the suffering less real number? If anything, the uncertainty adds weight. It tells us that some lives were lost without even the dignity of being counted, that some communities vanished so fully that history cannot measure them. Reflection for the listener. Pause with me here. Think of your own life. Do you measure it only in numbers, the days you have lived, the breaths you have taken, the meals you have eaten? Or do you measure it in moments, memories, feelings, connections? So it is with history. The plague cannot be measured only by fractions. It must be felt in silence, in symbols, in echoes. Closing this part, and so we return to our question: how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? The answer is, we do not know the exact half. Perhaps less, perhaps more. The truth hides in the shadows of incomplete records. But in those shadows, one thing is clear: the devastation was beyond reckoning. The candle flickers, the disagreement remains, and the story continues, not broken by doubt, but enriched by it. For doubt, too, is part of history. Close your eyes if you wish. Let the present moment soften at the edges. The hum of electricity, the distant sounds of modern life, the familiar comfort of your room, all of it can fade just for a while. Tonight we will step gently into another time. We will not rush, we will not force. We will simply imagine together, stepping into a medieval street picture. Yourself on a narrow cobblestone street. The year is 1348. The sun is setting, casting long shadows against the stone walls of houses pressed close together. Wooden shutters creak as they close for the night. The air carries the smell of wood smoke and something less pleasant, stagnant water refuse left in the gutters. You hear the distant toll of a bell. Slow, heavy. You know what it means. Another soul gone. Another family mourning. The sound is not rare anymore. It is part of daily life. The street is almost empty. Where once children might have played, where once merchants might have called their wares, now there is only the soft shuffle of a figure moving quickly, head down, cloth pressed to nose. The city is quieter than you have ever known, and yet the silence itself is loud, pressing into your chest. Entering a home now. Step inside a small home. The door groans as it opens. The air is dim, heavy, with the scent of herbs, rosemary, sage, lavender, burned in the hope that they will purify what cannot be seen. A candle flickers on a wooden table. Around it sit a family. A child leans against her mother, her forehead warm. The father looks toward the door as if expecting something, though nothing comes. Their faces are tired, lined not only by age but by fear. You sit in the corner, unseen but present. You hear the whisper of prayers. You hear the rasp of breath. You notice the rough texture of the table under your fingertips, the dripping wax hardening in little rivers. The market at dawn now shift the scene. The next morning you stand at the edge of a marketplace. The stalls are half empty. The voices of merchants are few. Some wear cloths tied across their faces. Some glance around nervously as though the air itself might betray them. Goods are still exchanged. Bread, cheese, onions, cloth, but the chatter is muted. Where once the market was filled with laughter and bargaining, now every sound feels restrained. And then suddenly you hear it, the creak of wheels, the heavy roll of a cart. Two men push it slowly. Upon it lie bodies covered in cloth. The marketplace falls silent. Heads turn, then look away. The men pass, the cart continues, and life resumes, but softer, thinner, subdued. A church at midnight now. Let us step into a church. Midnight. The air is cold stone walls holding the chill. Candles flicker at the altar. A few figures kneel, their heads bowed low. Some weep quietly. Others stare into the flame, their lips moving without sound. The priest's voice echoes against the stone. Prayers for mercy. Prayers for forgiveness. Outside, the bells toll again. Inside, the prayers grow louder, almost desperate, as if volume might carry them more swiftly to heaven. The smell of incense mixes with the faint odor of sickness carried in on clothes. The shadows stretch long, and in them people wonder, will I live to see the morning? The empty road step, outside the city now. Picture a road leading into the countryside. Once it would have been crowded. Pilgrims, traders, farmers with carts of grain. Now it lies empty, dust settling softly. In the distance you see a small group moving quickly, a family perhaps carrying bundles fleeing the city. Their faces are tense, their steps hurried. They hope the countryside will protect them, but the shadow of the plague often follows even here. Beside the road, fields stretch wide. Some are untended crops withering. Livestock wander without herders. Nature begins to reclaim what humans have abandoned. A moment of stillness pours here. Feel the air against your skin, the uneven cobblestones under your feet, the faint tremble in your chest as you breathe. Notice the silence, the smell of herbs, the glow of candles, the sound of bells. This is not history in a book. This is presence, imagination, empathy. You are here just for a moment, walking the same streets, breathing the same air, seeing the same light that people once saw 7 centuries ago. Why imagine? Why do we build these scenes? Because history is more than data. It is lived experience. To understand the Black Plague, we must not only know the facts, we must also feel the atmosphere, the heaviness of days when the world seemed to pause. Imagination is a bridge. It allows us to touch gently the humanity behind the numbers. It turns half of Europe into streets, homes, markets, churches, into candles and bells, into whispers and silences. Closing this part. So, how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? Partly it was, through this, the transformation of ordinary life into scenes of fear and emptiness. Streets falling silent. Markets subdued. Churches echoing with desperate prayers. Roads abandoned. Families huddled by candlelight, waiting, hoping, fearing. The candle in our imagination still flickers. The bell still tolls. And though the scene begins to fade, the echo remains. When you open your eyes, you return to your own room. The hum of electricity, the comfort of safety. Yet for a moment you walked those streets. And in that walk you honored the memory of lives, once lived, once lost, once remembered. The bell has tolled, the candle has flickered, the streets have fallen silent in our imagination. We have walked through the facts, the myths, the reflections. And now to hold them together, let us weave with something softer metaphors, because sometimes the truth of history is too large for numbers, too heavy for plain words. Sometimes we need images, shapes in the mind, to carry what the heart cannot hold directly. The plague as a wind, imagine the Black Plague as a wind. It is invisible. You cannot see it coming down the street. You cannot hold it in your hand. And yet you feel it in the chill that raises goosebumps in the way trees bend, in the sound of shutters banging. So too was the plague. People did not see bacteria. They saw neighbours fall, families vanish, villages grow still. They felt it sweep past, choosing some and sparing others, just as a gust of wind rattles one house, while leaving the next untouched. The explanation, the metaphor of wind, reminds us of invisibility. The plague moved through breath, through fleas, through the air of crowded rooms. Like wind it carried force without form power, without shape. The plague as a fire. Now picture it as fire. It begins small, an ember on a ship, a spark in a marketplace. At first it seems containable, but fire feeds on what it touches. It leaps from stall to stall, from house to house, until the whole town glows red. The plague too spread in leaps. A bite here, a cough there. A city falls ill, and before anyone understands, another city ignites. The network of trade routes became kindling, carrying sparks across seas and continents. The explanation. The metaphor of fire shows us speed and hunger. The plague devoured populations the way flames devour dry wood, leaving behind ash and silence. The plague as a mirror. But beyond wind and fire, there is another image, a mirror. When the plague arrived, it did not only bring death, it reflected life. It showed people who they were when fear stripped away the comfort of routine. Some saw courage, some saw cruelty, some saw faith, some saw despair. Stand before a mirror, and you cannot hide. So it was with the plague. It revealed humanity's fragility, but also its resilience. It showed the cracks in society, inequality, suspicion, fear of outsiders, but also the threads of compassion that survived. The explanation, the metaphor of a mirror, reminds us that catastrophe does not invent human nature. It reveals it. The candle against the dark. And finally imagine a candle, small, flickering, fragile. Against the vastness of night, its light is almost nothing, and yet it is enough to hold back the dark in a small circle. So too were the lives of survivors. The prayers whispered, the art painted, the stories written, tiny flames against a vast shadow. And though many candles went out, enough remained to carry the light forward into the next century, the next world, the next memory. The explanation, the metaphor of a candle, reminds us that survival is not about conquering the dark, but about carrying a small flame long enough to see another dawn. Why metaphors matter? You might wonder, why use these images, wind, fire, mirror, candle, when science already explains the plague? Because science tells us what happened, but metaphor tells us what it felt like. Numbers count bodies. Metaphors carry experiences. They let us understand not only with the mind, but with the heart. They remind us that history is not distant, but alive, woven with feelings as real as the ones you carry tonight. A gentle pause. Take a breath. Imagine the wind brushing your face. Imagine the fire's warmth and danger. Imagine the mirror reflecting your eyes. Imagine the candle's glow in your hands. Each of these is not only a picture, but a doorway. They allow you to step closer to a past you never lived yet, somehow still feel. Closing this part. So how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? It moved like wind, invisible but unstoppable. It burned like fire, devouring what it touched. It acted like a mirror, revealing who people were in crisis. And it left behind candles, small flames of survival carrying light through the night. These images do not replace the facts. They complete them. They soften the harsh edges with shapes the soul can hold. The candle on our table burns low, but it still burns. The metaphors remain gentle companions for the journey ahead. The night has been long. The bells have tolled. The carts have rolled past. The air has felt heavy with silence and loss. We have walked through narrow streets darkened by fear, and we have lit candles that flickered against an endless night. But history, like night, does not last forever. Every night ends. Every storm passes. Every shadow eventually yields to light. And so let us imagine not the terror of the plague at its height, but the fragile, trembling dawn that followed. The first morning, imagine. Waking one morning to quiet. Not the quiet of fear, but the quiet of calm. The bells are not ringing. The coughing next door has stopped, not because of death, but because health has returned. The streets outside are still but not empty. You hear footsteps, hesitant, cautious, but alive. You open the door and see neighbors doing the same. Doors that have been shut for weeks creak open. Faces appear in windows. For the first time in months, you see eyes not filled with dread, but with cautious hope. The sun is rising. Its light spills across rooftops, gilding them in gold. Birds are singing again, their voices almost startling after so much silence. The world feels fragile, but also renewed. The market returns. Step forward into the marketplace. Stalls are being set up once more. Bread is laid out, cheese unwrapped, fish arranged. The goods are fewer, the voices quieter, but they are there. You hear bargaining laughter greetings. Children run cautiously between the stalls. Their laughter thin at first, then louder, freer. The marketplace is not as it was, but it is alive. And after death has brushed so close, Life feels precious in every sound. The church bells change. Now hear the bells again. They toll, but not for funerals. They ring for worship, for thanksgiving, for survival. Their sound is lighter, almost jubilant, as if the bells themselves are relieved. People gather not in fear, but in gratitude. Inside the church, candles glow, prayers rise, but now they carry a different tone. Less desperate, more thankful. Some kneel in silence, others weep softly. Some smile, holding the hands of loved ones who survived. The fields revive. Beyond the city, fields stretch wide. Many lie untended, but now farmers return. They bend to the soil, plant seeds once more, call to their oxen, rebuild fences. The rhythm of life begins again. In some fields, wildflowers have grown where grain once stood. They sway gently in the breeze, as if nature has taken a moment to cover the scars with beauty. The sight is bittersweet, but also healing. The family's tables step into a home. A wooden table stands in the center. Food is sparse, bread, onions, a little cheese, but the family sits together. They hold hands before eating. They bow their heads in silence, not only in prayer, but in memory of those missing. The chairs are fewer. Some faces are absent, yet the presence of those who remain is sharper, clearer, brighter. Every smile feels like a gift. Every shared word feels like a treasure. The memory of absent survival does not mean forgetting. The streets still carry echoes of those who are gone. Graves line the outskirts of towns. Empty houses stand as mute reminders. The survivors live with both gratitude and grief woven together. And yet in this mixture there is something profoundly human, the ability to live forward while carrying memory. To honor the dead by continuing to breathe, to plant, to sing, to love. The gift of survival. Pause for a moment. Imagine yourself as one of these survivors. Imagine the taste of fresh air after weeks of fear. Imagine the feel of sunlight on your face. Imagine the relief of holding someone's hand without dread. Survival is not triumph in the usual sense. It is not victory over an enemy. It is simply continuation, a quiet persistence. And yet, in its simplicity, it is profound. Lessons in the dawn. The dawn after the plague whispered lessons that still matter. That life is fragile and therefore precious. That community is easily broken and therefore must be cherished. That tomorrow is not promised and therefore today must be lived with care. Survivors did not always speak these lessons aloud, but they carried them in the way they lived, in the rebuilding of homes, in the planting of fields, in the tenderness of touch once feared. Closing this part. So, how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? Yes, through bacteria, through fleas, through ships and markets, but also through absence, through silence, through fear. And yet in its wake something remained: survivors who carried the flame forward, who saw the first sunrise after the storm and chose to keep walking. The candle we imagined earlier is still burning. It is smaller now, but steady. And in its glow we see not only death, but survival. Not only shadow, but dawn. The dawn after the plague is fragile, glowing faintly in our imagination. Fields revive. Markets stir bells, toll with gratitude instead of grief. And yet behind these images questions remain. Because every fact of the plague carries not only scientific explanation, but also philosophical weight. Let us take them one by one like beads on a string, each fact threaded with a reflection, each reflection soft but deep. The bacterium fact. The Black Plague was caused by Yersinia pestis, a bacterium so small it cannot be seen with the naked eye. Reflection. How strange that something invisible can alter the visible world so completely. If a single unseen life form can topple empires, what does that say about our sense of control? Are we ever truly secure, or is life always balanced on the edge of the unseen? The flea and the rat fact. Fleas carried the bacteria. Rats carried the fleas. Ships carried the rats. Reflection. Our world is woven with connections, human, animal, environment. If the smallest link in that chain trembles, the whole web shakes. Do we live as isolated beings? Or are we always part of a larger fabric, vulnerable to its every tug? The harbour fact. The plague arrived in Europe through ports. Ships bustling with goods and travellers became corridors of contagion. Reflection. The same paths that nourish us can harm us. Trade routes spread wealth and knowledge, but also death. Is this not the paradox of connection? That to open ourselves to the world is both a gift and a risk. The buboes fact. The body revealed infection through swollen lumps, painful, dark, unmistakable. Reflection. The body does not lie. It carries truth even when the mind cannot understand. In a way, the buboes were the body's cry for help, a visible mark of the invisible. What does this remind us about our own bodies today? How often do they whisper truths we ignore until too late? The bell fact bells tolled constantly during the plague, announcing death, calling for prayer, filling silence with sound. Reflection sound becomes memory. A bell tolling at midnight is not just a note of metal, it is a reminder of loss of fragility of the passage of time. How many sounds in our own lives carry such hidden weight? A ringtone, a knock on the door, a loved one's voice. The flight fact people fled cities to escape the plague, but in fleeing they often carried it further. Reflection. Our instinct to survive can sometimes deepen the danger. How often do we even now run from discomfort, only to spread it elsewhere? Fear to fear, anger to anger. Can survival truly exist apart from responsibility to others? The mass graves fact. In many towns, bodies were buried hastily in pits too numerous for individual graves. Reflection. The earth itself became the keeper of memory. When names are lost, when records fail, the soil remembers. What does this teach us about dignity? That even when forgotten by people, life leaves a trace in the world itself. The survivors fact. Many died, but not all. Some lived, rebuilt, carried forward. Reflection. Survival is not only luck, it is also the stubborn will of life to continue to sprout again, even from cracks in stone. What does this reveal about resilience? Not as triumph, but as quiet persistence. The myths fact. People explained the plague through myths, divine punishment, poisoned air, outsiders' guilt. Reflection. When knowledge is absent, stories arise. But even now, do we not still tell stories to soothe fear? Conspiracy theories, superstitions, half-truths, are they not the modern versions of medieval myths? What does this reveal about our enduring need for narrative? The candle fact. Families lit candles for the sick, for the dead, for hope. Reflection. A candle is both small and profound. It does not end darkness, but it holds back despair. How often do we too need small lights, not to erase our troubles, but to remind us that shadows are not complete? The pattern taken together, these facts, are not only science, they are a pattern of fragility, of connection, of resilience. Each scientific truth becomes, when held long enough, a philosophical question, and each question leads us deeper into understanding not just what happened then, but what it means to be human now. A gentle pause. Breathe with me here. In and out. Notice how every fact carries weight. Notice how every detail of the plague whispers both science and philosophy. History is not only the study of what was, it is also the mirror of what I learned. Closing this part. So, how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? Yes, with bacteria and fleas, with ships and markets, with swollen bodies and silent streets, but also with questions that still echo about control, about connection, about survival, about meaning. The candle continues to burn, the bell continues to echo, and the reflections continue, soft and unhurried, guiding us toward the next step. The story of the plague is heavy. It carries bells, candles, silence, fear. It carries numbers too large to hold questions too deep to answer. And yet in the middle of this journey we are allowed no invited to pause. Because history is not only about looking back, it is also about being present. And presence begins with something simple, the breath. The first breath, inhale slowly. Notice the coolness at the tip of your nose. Notice the chest rising, the ribs expanding. Hold for a moment. Now exhale, soft and long. Feel the shoulders drop, the weight releasing. Even as you listen to the story of death, your breath is proof of life. Each inhale says, I am here. Each exhale says, I am safe. The second breath, inhale again. This time imagine the air as clean, fresh, carrying no shadow. Exhale, and with it imagine letting go not only of the day's tension, but of centuries of fear that once clung to this story. The people of the 14th century did not have this luxury. Their air felt poisoned, their breaths uncertain. But you here now can breathe freely. That freedom is a gift. The weight of the body, notice. The weight of your body where it rests. On a bed, on a chair, on the earth itself. Feel gravity not as an enemy but as an embrace. The earth holds you. The floor supports you. You do not have to struggle. In the plague years, bodies were carried away too quickly, too heavily. Tonight, your body simply rests. That too is survival. The third breath, inhale once more. Deep, calm, steady. Exhale and imagine the sound of a distant bell. But this time, it does not toll for death. It tolls for peace, for continuation, for the quiet rhythm of life that still flows. Your breath is a bell ringing softly in the silence. The shoulders and hands, bring your attention to your shoulders. Are they tense? Let them fall, let them soften. Notice your hands. Are they curled tight? Unclench them, let them rest open. Imagine those hands as candles. Small, warm, glowing, even relaxed, even still they hold light. The fourth breath, inhale. Imagine drawing in sunlight, even if it is night. Exhale. Imagine releasing centuries of shadow, letting them dissolve like smoke. You are not in the 14th century. You are here alive, breathing. The gift of pause. The survivors of the plague carried forward, with no pause, no rest. They buried, rebuilt, endured. But here in this quiet moment, you can rest. You can pause. This pause is not escape. It is remembrance in gentleness. It is saying, I acknowledge the weight, and I choose to set it down just for now. The fifth breath. Inhale deeply. Hold for 2 seconds. Exhale longer than you inhaled. Let the air leave slowly like a sigh after a long day. Feel the quiet in your chest. Feel the stillness in the room. This is the opposite of panic, the opposite of fear. It is calm, deliberate, healing. The connection, remember, people once breathed through cloth, soaked in herbs, fearing the air itself. You breathe freely, openly. Each breath is a connection across time, acknowledging their struggle, honoring your present safety. The act of breathing is history too. It continues unbroken across centuries. Closing this pause. So how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? Yes, with bacteria, with rats, with myths and fear. But it also killed through breath, through the air between us, through the lungs of the sick. And tonight, in this pause, breath becomes not death but life. Breath becomes a reminder that history is past and presence is now. The candle still burns, the bell still echoes. But your breath is steady, and that is enough. The journey has taken us far. We began with a candle and a question. We traced the tiny bacterium hiding in fleas. We listened to myths of poisoned air and wrathful heavens. We walked cobblestone streets in our imagination, heard the bells, saw the candles, felt the silence. We reflected on philosophy, on fragility, on survival, and we paused, breathing slowly, allowing calm to return. Now, before we move further, let us weave the threads together, not to tie them into a knot of certainty, but to see the tapestry they form when held side by side. The scientific thread science tells us the plague was caused by Yersinia pestis. It travelled on fleas carried by rats, transported on ships, spread through marketplaces and homes. Its symptoms were unmistakable: fever, chills, swollen buboes, blackened skin, sudden death. This thread is clear, precise, measurable. It grounds the story in the tangible. It tells us what happened and how. The mythic thread. But science was not what people saw. They saw anger from heaven-poisoned air, strangers blamed for wells. They painted skeletons dancing with kings, wore charms against invisible vapors, lit candles to push back divine judgment. This thread is symbolic, imaginative, sometimes cruel. It reveals the stories humans create when faced with the unseeable. It tells us not only what people feared, but how they made fear bearable. The philosophical thread philosophy reminds us catastrophe is a mirror. It strips away illusions of permanence. It forces questions: why do we live? Why do we suffer? What remains when certainty collapses? This thread is quiet, reflective, timeless. It connects the 14th century with our own. The same questions whispered then are whispered now each time life trembles. The personal thread. And then the smallest, most delicate thread, the personal. The sound of bells in the night. The glow of one candle in one room. The silence of an empty street. The absence of touch. These are not numbers. They are moments. They remind us that history is not only grand sweeps of population, but the fragile experience of individuals. They are the threads of empathy, the ones we feel in our own hearts. The woven cloth. When placed together, these threads do not contradict each other. They harmonize. Science explains cause. Myth reveals imagination. Philosophy asks meaning. Personal reflection makes it human. The cloth they form is not perfect. It has gaps, holes where certainty falls away. It is uneven, stitched by fragments of records, whispers of memory, layers of soil. And yet, even imperfect, it is strong enough to hold the story. The beauty of uncertainty. Notice something: the cloth is beautiful, not because it is flawless, but because it carries both clarity and mystery. Science says here is the bacterium. Myth says here is the story people believed. Philosophy says here is the question that remains. Personal memory says here is how it felt. Together they remind us that history is not only about knowing, it is also about honoring what cannot be fully known. A pause to reflect. Take a breath with me. In, hold, out. Picture the threads in your mind. Each one a color: science cool and clear, myth dark and vivid, philosophy soft and muted, personal warm and fragile. See how they cross, how they weave. Notice that the pattern is not simple, not symmetrical, and yet the whole is richer because of it. The lesson of the weaving. So, how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? The answer is not one thread. It is all of them woven together. It killed through bacteria. It killed through fear and myth. It killed through questions too heavy to answer. It killed through silence and separation. And yet from these same threads came survival, resilience, memory. Closing this part, the candle still burns. The bell still echoes. The threads still cross. We are not at the end yet, but here, in this soft weaving, we see the shape of the story more clearly, not as a single line, but as a tapestry, not as a closed book, but as a cloth still stretching, still unfolding, still connecting past to present. And as we hold this cloth gently, we are reminded it is not only about the plague, it is about us, about what it means to live, to fear, to hope, to survive. The threads have been woven. Science has spoken, myth has whispered, philosophy has lingered, and the small details of personal life have given the story a human face. We have breathed together, paused together, reflected together. Now, before we close, let us step gently toward the threshold. Not a door slammed shut, but a soft archway, a passage. We are not rushing out of this story. We are simply preparing to leave its deepest chamber, carrying with us what it has given, the candle near its end. Picture again the candle we have kept with us since the beginning. Its wax has melted low. The flame is small but still steady. It has carried us through darkness, through silence, through the corridors of history. Soon it will go out, but before it does, we pause to watch its light, flickering, trembling, yet faithful. The candle reminds us that stories are not about permanence. They are about presence. It has burned long enough to give us this journey. That is enough. The bell's final echo, and here again the bell, deep, resonant, patient. It has tolled for death, for prayer, for survival. Now it tolls one last time, not in grief, not in fear, but in remembrance. Its sound stretches across centuries, reminding us that what was lived is not lost. The echo remains. Even when the bell is silent, we still feel the vibration in the air. The doorway of memory. Imagine yourself standing at a doorway. Behind you lies the shadowed street of plague, the marketplaces, the graves, the prayers. Ahead lies the quiet of your own room, your own breath, your own life. You do not leave everything behind. You carry something with you, a memory, a lesson, a tenderness. The doorway is not a division but a passage, a whisper not a shout. Stories do not need to end with certainty. They need only to end with gentleness. So, as we step closer to the threshold, let us not demand final answers. Let us whisper, instead, we have seen, we have remembered, we have honored. That is enough. A soft gathering of threads, the bacterium, the flea, the rat, threads of science. The poisoned air, the wrath of God, threads of myth. The mirror of fragility, the philosophy of impermanence, threads of thought. The candle in the window, the silence in the street, threads of personal life. All are gathered here, resting softly in your memory. They will not vanish when the candle goes out. They will stay faint, but present like the faint scent of smoke long after a fire has been extinguished. The listener's presence, and you, yes, you who are listening now, you are part of this story too. By listening, you have kept the memory alive. By breathing calmly as you heard it, you have honored lives long gone. The threshold we step toward is not only an ending, it is also an offering. From them to you, from you to the future, preparing for the next step. As we draw near, let us soften our pace even more. Let each word be like the last notes of a lullaby. Let each sentence be a breath. We are not closing the book abruptly. We are letting it rest gently on the table where it will wait for us should we ever wish to open it again. Closing this part. So how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? The answer lies not only in science, not only in myth, not only in philosophy, but in the weaving of them all. And as we step through the final threshold, we do not leave with fear. We leave with quiet understanding, with empathy, with presence. The candle flickers once more. The bell's echo fades. The threshold is before us. We are ready. We have travelled far together. From the first toll of the bell to the last flicker of the candle, we have walked through the streets of plague-stricken Europe, breathed in the myths, and the science reflected on fragility, survival and meaning. And now we find ourselves at the final curve of the path, standing once again before the question that guided us here. How did the Black Plague kill half of Europe? The question revisited. We could answer quickly with science. Yersinia pestis carried by fleas on rats spread through ships and markets, killing millions with fever and buboes. That is true. But it is not the whole truth. We could answer with myth. It was God's wrath, the poisoned air, the curse of the stars, the treachery of outsiders. That is what many believed then. But belief is not certainty. We could answer with philosophy. It killed by revealing how fragile life is, by stripping away illusions of permanence, by reminding humanity that tomorrow is never promised. That is meaningful but still incomplete. The question remains larger than any one answer. The nature of big questions. Some questions are not meant to be closed. They are meant to remain open, like doors left ajar, allowing us to return, to reconsider, to reflect again. The Black Plague is one of those questions. To ask how it killed half of Europe is also to ask what it means to live, what it means to die, what it means to carry memory across centuries. What we have gathered. Along the way we have gathered pieces science gave us. The bacterium, the flea, the rat, the pathways of contagion. Myth gave us stories of wrath, of poisoned air, of outsiders blamed. Philosophy gave us mirrors of fragility, lessons in impermanence. Personal reflection gave us candles, bells, silences, and the quiet ache of absence. None of these alone is enough. Together they form a mosaic. Still incomplete, still jagged, but enough to glimpse the shape of truth. The candle and the horizon. Think again of the candle we have carried with us through this story. Its light is small, fragile, but steady. Around it the horizon stretches vast and dark. The candle does not banish the horizon. It only reminds us that darkness is not absolute. So too with our question. We do not solve it, we do not conquer it. We only hold it long enough to see the outline of history, the contours of human resilience. That is enough. The value of the journey. Perhaps the true answer is this. The value lies not in the conclusion but in the journey itself, in walking slowly through the streets of the past, in pausing to breathe, to imagine, to empathize, in allowing ourselves to sit with mystery Instead of rushing towards certainty, history becomes not a set of facts but a meditation, not a lecture but a lullaby, not a closed book but a mirror we hold gently to the light, the listener's place. And you listening now are part of this open ending. By carrying the story in your mind, by breathing calmly as you reflect, you keep the question alive. You are not asked to solve it. You are only asked to honor it, to let it rest within you, like a quiet echo, the final whisper. So, how did the Black Plague kill half of Europe with a bacterium, with fear, with silence, with stories, with questions that outlived the dead? And how did Europe survive with candles, with breath, with resilience carried in fragile hands? Both truths remain, both truths matter, and the question still unanswered is the bridge between them. Closing this part, the bell no longer tolls, the candle burns low, the room is quiet. The question remains not as a burden but as a companion, and perhaps that is the gift of an open ending, to walk away not with closure but with wonder, not with certainty but with peace. The journey has unfolded slowly, like the turning of old pages in a fragile book. We have followed the question of the plague, not to close it, but to rest with it. And now at the edge of this story, there is one last breath to take together. It is a soft moment, not a demand, not a command, only an invitation, like the way a candle in a window invites a traveller to rest. The quiet after the story. Notice how you feel right now. Perhaps your breath is slower than when we began. Perhaps your body feels heavier settled into the bed, the chair, the floor beneath you. Perhaps your mind feels calmer, not because it has all the answers, but because it has walked gently with the questions. This quiet is part of the story too. It is the echo after the bell, the hush after the prayer, the stillness after the storm, an invitation to stay connected. If this journey has brought you calm, if the story of the past has given you a place to rest in the present, I invite you softly to stay connected. You may press a small button like subscribe, share, not because you must, not because urgency presses upon you, but because such gestures keep this quiet corner alive. Think of it as leaving a stone on a grave or a candle in a church, a small act that says, I was here, I listened, I remembered. The value of sharing. When you share, you are not spreading noise, you are spreading quiet. You are helping others who, like you, may long for a place to pause, a place to breathe, a place where history is told not as a lecture, but as a lullaby. Perhaps someone far away in another city, in another country, will stumble into this same calm because of you. Perhaps your gesture will become their candle, the gift of comment. And if you feel moved, you may leave a comment. It does not need to be long, it does not need to be clever, it can be as simple as I was here. I listened, I wondered. Such words are not only feedback, they are part of the tapestry. They remind us that stories live when they are shared, when they touch more than one heart. Gratitude for presence. But even if you do nothing, no like, no share, no comment, your presence here is enough. Listening itself is an act of care. It means you have given your time, your attention, your breath to memory, and that is already precious. So thank you for being here, for breathing here, for remembering here. The last breath together. Let us take one final breath together before we close. Inhale slowly, hold gently, exhale fully. Feel the calm settle, feel the story rest, closing the invitation. So as the candle burns low and the bell's echo fades, know this, you are always welcome to return. This quiet corner remains. The stories wait patiently. The questions linger softly. And if you choose to keep this corner alive with a like, a subscription, a comment, it will not be noise. It will be another small flame, another soft echo, another step in the long continuity of listening. No urgency, no demand, only invitation. The story rests now, and so do you. The candle we have carried together is nearly gone. Its wax has melted low, its flame flickers small yet steady. We have walked through shadowed streets, heard the tolling of bells, seen the silence of forgotten villages, and felt the tender breath of survival. The story of the Black Plague rests now, in your memory not as a closed book but as a gentle echo, and yet history never ends in one place. It always leans forward, always opens another door. Tonight, before we part, let us look softly toward the next threshold, a whisper of continuity. The plague was not the first shadow to fall upon humanity, and it will not be the last. Long before the earth had already endured ice ages, volcanic winters, famines, extinctions, long after new questions would rise about civilizations that vanished, about climates that changed, about futures not yet written. History is a chain of wonder. Every question leads to another. Every story is a bridge. The question that awaits, so, what shall we ask next? Perhaps, what was Earth like during the Ice Age? A time when glaciers stretched across continents, when mammoths roamed plains of snow, when early humans huddled by fires carving their first symbols into stone. Or perhaps, what if Earth itself was a test, a stage not only for survival but for meaning, a question larger than any one plague, larger than any one century? These questions wait quietly like unopened letters, like paths just beyond the horizon. The image of snow. Imagine now for a moment the sound of snow falling, soft, steady, muffling the world into silence. Where once we heard bells tolling in plague-ridden towns, we now hear only the hush of white blanketing valleys, softening forests, covering even the memory of footsteps. The air is cold, but clear. The horizon glows faintly pink with dawn. Life continues, not loudly, not abundantly, but persistently in firelit caves, in careful migrations, in the slow carving of stories into the bones of time. A gentle anticipation. This is where we might go next, into the ice, into the cold, into the resilience of life, when the world itself seemed uninhabitable. Or, perhaps further still, into the question of civilizations before our own, or into the mysteries of continents long vanished. Each story is a candle. Each story is a bell. Each story waits for us to step forward. The listener's choice. And here I invite you once more softly, with no demand, to choose whether you will walk further. You may stay, rest, and let this story be enough. Or you may return another night to hear the snow fall, to feel the ice, to wonder at the worlds that came before. Either way, the path is open. The questions are waiting. The closing image. So let us end, not with a door slammed shut, but with an image. A quiet night. Snow falling gently. A candle glowing in a window. A horizon stretching endlessly, promising new stories, new questions, new dawns. The Black Plague rests behind us. The Ice Age or some other wonder lies ahead. And between them, here and now, is you listening, breathing alive,